It is such a pleasure to have you on my show today. Hello. How are you?
Hello, hello. Good to speak to you again, Janine.
Oh my goodness, I cannot wait to get into this conversation. We have had so many chats in the last few months around everything that you are doing with your business, the impact that you are having on some major decisions that are going on in the world. And I think your work around how to actually truly deeply listen and therefore help what you do, take what you do, help businesses unleash their brilliance is so awesome. So I cannot wait to get into this. But before we do, um, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back. Um, Talk to me about when you were a little girl. Can you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up?
How little do you want to go?
It's up to you.
um, I wanted to be an actress and a performer. I just had a natural flair for making people laugh. And I remember in primary school, I would do little weather reports in class, and I would get dressed up for it. And I'd just make the weather report just this hilarious 5-minute segment. And
Yeah.
had the class in stitches, and they used to say, Elisa, you should be an actress. And then I said, I don't want to be an actress on Home and Away because I don't want to kiss strangers on TV. That's what I said.
Oh dear.
And then I wanted to become a doctor because I'd like to solve problems and help people. And then I loved puzzles. I always was into Sudoku or crosswords or figuring out stuff. So I had a lot of interests, but I definitely had, dreams of starting my own business. I never knew what it was, but, all the Choys in my line of history are all business owners. We're not the dentists or the doctors or the ists or the pharmacists. We're all entrepreneurs. So it was in our blood, and, even how I played was always playing shop, So I guess an entrepreneur in the making, but had no idea what I was going to sell.
And where did you grow up?
I was born in Hong Kong, and so in
Right.
my early years, we lived in a small apartment. It was literally like a studio size. It was my brother and my mother. She was a single mother, a single parent, and so my mother had a jewelry shop in a hotel, and from the age of 4, I would help her in the shop. So I'd stand on a little stool and my little bob haircut, and she would have customers coming in, and she made her own jewelry, and these customers would point into the glass cabinet and say, I'd like to take a look at this, and I would just hand them the pieces of jewelry and just be that little cute obedient girl on her side. And so I always got lots of toys and gifts and stuff, whilst my brother was in the back room with the babysitter crying all the time. So I had a very early taste of shop, I guess. And so, yeah, that was a Hong Kong experience. And through that shop, my mother met my stepfather, who ended up, he was from Australia, and they got together, and then she decided, I want to go to a country, to a language I don't even speak the language of. So she made a very brave move in the 80s, early 80s. So we migrated to Adelaide. So I grew up in Adelaide, and then we moved to Brisbane, and I did most of my schooling and university in Brisbane. And then when I finished university, I came to Sydney.
How do you think that childhood has shaped who you've become and what it is that you're doing now?
Wow. I definitely loved commerce, that's for sure, and working with people. I was more the front person, engaging people, and my natural skills are always soft skills. And I know that growing up after university, I studied commerce and economics and finance. They were very left brain and analytical. And the roles that I had as an analyst when I started was very, crunching the numbers, all that sort of stuff, not so much in front of customers or clients.
Yeah.
I found it frustrating. And back in the day, there was no such thing as EQ. It wasn't valued. Soft skills were not really valued. Hard technical skills were valued. So I found it really hard to find my place. And so I guess I jumped through a lot of different jobs and roles. Like, I started off as a consultant in banking, and then I did lots of various finance roles. And then I moved into other roles like retail, analytics, marketing, advertising. So I've kind of just done a living MBA.
Yeah.
The only thing I haven't done was law, but I did do 1 year of law, and I hated it because it was too much reading, and I loved debating, but I hated reading, hated reading all that stuff.
So when you arrived, how old were you when you arrived in Australia?
5.
You were 5. So can you remember what it was like landing in a country that everything looks new, everything, people are speaking differently, the food is different, culturally it's different. Can you remember anything about that moment?
Actually, I don't have
Wow.
very vivid memories of that early part of my upbringing. I don't know why.
Mm.
I suppose we didn't have the ability to take photos on our iPhone to scroll through and jog your memory. So yeah, no. Honestly, I would have to burn a lot of brain power to find something from the recesses of my brain. But I do remember that in my early time in primary school, I was the only Asian in the primary school, the whole school, besides one Vietnamese kid and my brother. And I remember there was a lot of racism, but I didn't really know what that meant, because you don't know you're different until you're told you're different, right? So I remember being teased a lot for being Asian. And back then, the Asians in Australia were really the migrants or the refugees that came from Vietnam. So then they used to say that I was Vietnamese and I came from a boat and all that. And I used to go home and say, Mum, am I Vietnamese? And she's like, no, 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 you're not Vietnamese. so yeah, I suppose those were some of my earliest memories of what it was like to be in Australia. But yeah, honestly, nothing else besides that.
I'm just curious as to whether your curiosity around unearthing the real answers, on really trying to find the truth and the facts, whether there is that link back to your childhood at all. Like, where does it come from, this insane curiosity that you have of delving deep, of trying to find the answers, of really uncovering what's truly going on, versus what the majority of people do is we take the surface level answer. Do you have any insight into where that's come from?
Well, I could probably say it's a personality thing for one, which is I'm just a curious cat. I asked a lot of why questions.
Mm.
And because I have a natural strategic macro brain, I look at a wide range of things from many angles to piece together the bigger picture puzzle. And I have a curious, insane curiosity around understanding how people work and why do people act the way they do? Why do they say this to me? Why do people fight and have wars? Like, all those big existential questions, they kind of plagued my brain. I wasn't really into the schoolyard stuff. I was more into how does the world work? And then I sort of added that with my insane ability to analyze things. And that's why it lended to my spare time being, in Sudoku puzzles or crosswords or figuring things out or building Lego or just creating something out of nothing. And I loved to be able to then tell the world what I thought of the world in story in my little way. So it was probably an innate thing. It didn't serve me very well in corporate at times, because you're there to do a job, not to ask these existential questions. And so I found it quite challenging, because I would constantly be asking, why are we doing something this way? So I'm kind of a bit of a maverick and a rebel without a cause, at least in my early years. And there was a sense of frustration that there were better ways to look at the world, better ways to understand how people behave. There must be data out there. Like, we're making a lot of decisions, key decisions based on opinion, which has its place. Wisdom has its place. Experience has its place. But to have the humility to then say, I only know my view based on my lived experience. It's only one angle. What does the wider angle look like? And so when I apply that to my work, I am more interested in solving things like, vaccine rollout. What's the sentiment towards the economy, as opposed to helping businesses sell more Mars bars, which I do really well too. But the stuff that, gets me in the zone is working out how the world works.
Isn't it funny, this curiosity though? I can still remember my daughter coming home from school, and I said to her, "How's your day been?" And she went, "Oh, I got told off by the teacher today." And this was in primary school, and she's now 15, so it's not that long ago. And I said, "Why?" And she said, "I got told to stop asking questions." And I did phone the school the next day because I said, "You never stop asking questions, Taya. It's so important to keep asking questions about why." And the same thing happened with my 17-year-old son recently. He challenged the teacher because the teacher was obviously teaching the curriculum around a particular English piece. And he said, "I don't agree that that's where Shakespeare was coming from when he wrote this." And it's this ability, and he wasn't coming at it from an aggressive, argumentative perspective. It was a curiosity around, is that really true? Is there another way that we could look at it? So thank goodness that you had people around you that encouraged that curiosity. When you think about that, who do you think of that actually and by the way, I love that piece about being a maverick in corporate too. Like, I'm quite interested myself at the moment of exploring how we as human beings, even if we are strong and courageous and brave, our natural instinct is to want to conform and fit in, and how that's affecting our decision making. But I'm imagining there's been some people along your way that have inspired you to keep going. Can you think of any of those?
Honestly, no one particular person. That people have come in and out of my life at various points to nudge me. But I think it comes from within. I can't stop it, Janine. If I wish to do something to make my life easier at times, particularly when I was in corporate, was to switch off that why and the curiosity and just do your job, right? Yeah. But there were people along the way that understood and would see and understand where I'm coming from and encourage me. But there wasn't any hero person because to me, it was something that I just couldn't switch off, and I just had to live with it. I tried to fit in so hard so many times, but I just couldn't. And hence, I guess you just know when it's time for you to fly out of the cage, I'd say. And there's this beautiful quote from this song called Goodbye Little Yellow Bird or something, and I'm going to stuff it up, but I'm going to give it a go. It says, I'd rather brave the cold on a twig or something than to be in a gilded cage of gold. It's kind of like how I feel. Like if you resonate with that, then it's like you do have a role to play. And sometimes the environment that you're in doesn't encourage you to flourish and be your brilliant self, because my talents now are this curiosity allows me to not give up to find an answer. So there's always an answer, and I use data to the point where I could be in a zone for 10 hours, right, looking at something. And when I was looking at the US election last year, I kid you not, Janine, I had one track on my headphones playing on a loop for 10 hours while I was doing the analysis. 10 hours.
10 hours, that's ridiculous.
One
that's
song.
How your brain works.
Yeah. So that signals to me that that's where my genius lies, because time just flew. I didn't eat. The sun went down. I didn't even notice. But I found the answer.
So talk to us about this genius, because I think you're a classic example of somebody that has spent many years fighting a system, rebelling a system, as you said in your own words, just saying trying to fit in. But every time you try to fit in, it was that feeling of being caged and you had to get out. And I'm imagining there are many people listening to this podcast right now that feel exactly the same in terms of whatever their genius zone is. And, you've stepped into that place of founding and running your own business. Share with our audience what it is that you now do and what is driving you to do the work that you do.
So I run a business called Maven Data. It's the world's first AI-powered strategic market research company. So we're AI powered because we use the beauty of technology and advanced analytics to mine the data from the internet, which I call the market. So it enables us to do rapid, deep listening to understand what really matters to the general population. So imagine it's like, taking a traditional survey, poll, or focus group, but putting it on steroids. And so we can look at any issue in most spoken languages in any region of the world. Now, with a curious mind like mine, isn't that just the holy grail? So, I apply this method in a variety of ways. We look at industry, community, social policy topics. We also look at industry, corporate topics, and brand and marketing. There's so many applications of deep listening insights that we can bring to the table now. And I'm so excited because I see stuff that will help navigate leaders to make clear, confident decisions.
So the traditional approach to research, and having been a marketeer in a former life, would be you would pay an agency to run a series of focus groups, or you might do a quantitative piece of research, and based on the outcome of those focus groups, that quantitative research, potentially overlaid with a little bit of desk research, you make decisions that essentially are the next direction of the business. What you're sharing now is that you have developed a system that enables you to go deeper and wider, and therefore essentially have a significantly larger sample pool. But also what you're saying is you're getting a real read because you're listening to what people are saying. Is that right?
Yes, in a high level, you got it.
Yeah. So talk to me about, share with our listeners, where is the deep listening coming from? What are you actually listening to?
Okay. So I use the term deep listening quite loosely. It's actually very in-depth analysis using natural language processing of all the content on the open internet. So imagine we are constantly, every day, in the privacy of our own digital screens, reading, engaging with content online, whether it be text, images, videos, you name it. And we're talking petabytes of this data that we can analyze at speed. Now, a petabyte is 10 to the power of 15. So it's one with 15 bytes of data. And Facebook chunks about, multiple petabytes of data created every day. So there's a lot of data, right? So yes, sample size is now exploded. We use the element of natural language processing, understanding cognitive behavior, and neuro-linguistic programming frameworks to really measure the mathematical relationships of how content is related online and how people are engaging with it. Now, I can't tell you more than that because then they'll have to kill me, right? So it's essentially we are understanding what is really important. What do people deeply care about? And we measure it through emotion. So we're picking up on over 400 emotions that we measure in a hierarchy. And ultimately, it comes to two hero emotions, love and fear. And when you look at sort of emotions, we know as humans that we actually make decisions based on emotions. As much as we like to say we're rational, we're absolutely not rational. We are emotional creatures. And when we measure emotion, particularly strength of emotion, when you have a strong emotion, that's when you change behavior. And when we pick up on that, that's when you predict the market.
So you talk a lot about the fact that this unique methodology that you've created is essentially democratizing data for people. So suddenly you're getting incredible access to an incredible amount of data to potentially really increase your understanding of what is truly going on, that from an organization's perspective, and I'm imagining a community, a government, a country, a policy making perspective, allow you to really shape that way forward. Are you able to put what you do into context? Have you got any specific examples of how you have used what you use or do what you do that's essentially created that opportunity for people to start thinking differently to shape that way forward?
Okay, I'll give you a choose your own adventure. Would you like to talk about vaccines, which is what we're working on? Would you like to talk about the future of work and leadership? Would you like to, and I'll give you one more, would you like to talk about the future of food and wellness?
Oh my goodness. I'm going either leadership or vaccines. My curiosity is vaccines.
I knew.
Can we do that one?
All right, we can do that one. So we've been looking at vaccines for the Sydney Policy Lab, which is attached to the University of Sydney. Why? Because obviously the role of vaccines has a critical place in the recovery of the economy, the global and local economy. There's a definite requirement to really deeply listen to the market and the sentiment towards the vaccine, and it's multifaceted, it's highly complex. So the issue here is we want the vaccine to be rolled out as fast as possible to as many people as possible in the population in order to reach a level of herd immunity so that things can reopen again. Yeah, that's the outcome. However, to get there, to have a vaccine, it's actually a very individual decision. So, and each person's decision tree, what determines their decision to take the jab or not, is very unique. So for some people, it could be as easily as I'm doing it because I have an elderly person that lives at my house and I want to protect them. I do it because I'm a frontline worker and I'm exposed to risk. It could be I want to do it for the greater good because I know that, you know, if we all get there, then we all can be back to normal and move around the world again. Or it could be even like I don't want to because I'm just philosophically against it. There are so many factors that go into people's individual decisions, and it's not something that a government can say, go do it, right? We live in a democracy. So here is the problem. We need to deeply understand what the market is thinking and feeling, what's important to them in this world of vaccines. So the research we're doing is essentially, again, looking at the open internet, looking at the Australian market and understanding the content around a suite of narratives around vaccine. And vaccine hesitancy was the first one we looked at. So when we're testing that, it's essentially saying, is vaccine hesitancy an issue, yes or no? How do people feel about vaccine hesitancy? Now, I can tell you, it's not going to be a surprise, that vaccine hesitancy is definitely a real issue. It's what we call timeless, which means it's deeply engaging and relevant to society today. It's part of culture. Now, if we came up with a read that said it's transient, meaning not relevant, it means that vaccine hesitancy is not a problem. Yeah? So everything is based on questions, and we're testing these questions against the market. So the other element of this, which was really interesting, is we all expect some level of vaccine hesitancy, but then if you go to other circles of friends, some people are adamant that they'll take it. They're ready to take it. So it's really hard to unpick what's the overall sentiment of the country on this. What we found was that the emotions behind vaccine hesitancy is actually intensely negative, meaning there's a lot of fear currently, a lot of anxiety around it. Now, peeling through the layers of analysis, we can understand the why. So the why is where it informs our strategy. What do we do with it? So with vaccine hesitancy, it's very clear that people don't understand it. People don't understand the science of vaccines. People don't understand the rollout. There's frustration around the accessibility. There are so many, sub-stories within this hero narrative that is shaping this sentiment. And what that means is when we advise these groups, we're telling them what the market is saying so that they can position their messaging, their information, their timing of the messaging to actually be in tone, not tone deaf, that's what I would say, right? It's about influencing the population through engaging with them. Start with deep listening.
And so, for those cynics that might be listening, why is it so different than a focus group with thousands of people, where you're actually asking them outright or getting them to fill in some quantitative survey? Why is it so different? The cynics might be going, but we're already getting that data. So what's the difference?
Yeah, there's multiple ways to answer that, but the most important one is with a focus group or a survey, when you're asking somebody a question, you're going to get a biased answer. Like, no matter, give me an example when someone says they're going to do something in the future and they actually do it, they could change their mind, or they could be answering because they want, they want to tell you what you want to hear, or they have their own reason as to why they want to answer. So it's inherently biased. Opinions are biased. That's probably the most critical element of why it's what we do is far more superior in this sort of context. And that doesn't even go into sample size, like getting 1,000 people or 3,000 people takes time, resources and effort and manpower. And by the time, you get the information together, the mood could have already shifted. It's also not repeatable. You can't bring those same 1,000 people into the room again to say, hey, how do you feel about it now? It's not systematic and it's not accurate, and it's fundamentally, it's biased.
Hmm. And you've been able to use this approach to predict behavior, haven't you? So, with that in mind, what do you see as that big opportunity for business leaders, for policy creators, in terms of listening more deeply, in terms of being more curious, in terms of working with you to get a true read on what's really going on?
Do you want to pick an industry?
Yeah. Well, why don't we go back to the food one?
Okay. So most industries are going through dynamic shift and will always, yeah? And that shift is either structural shift from within the industry and how it operates, or from a consumer-led desire or need. We just change we evolve, right? So in the world of food, so I'm working with a client that is a major supplier of ready-made fresh food, salads, etc., to the major retailers, the supermarkets. Now they're in a position where they want to know what the consumer wants in their products. They can make whatever they want. Now, why? If you meet the demands of the current consumers today, then you will become a category leader. You also change the conversation from price competition to going to tenders to, as a supplier, to become a category leader, to actually say, we can see the future, we are producing the future, here it is, right? So it gives you the long-term sustainability and relevance, right, to the market. To understand what people want today and position yourself is a proactive, it's strategic, it's commercial, it's financial. So you double down and focus your resources on meeting those needs. It's as simple as that, to be honest. Otherwise, you're just guessing, wouldn't you?
Whereas you're getting an actual read on the emotions that that people are talking around through this, what did you call it, the petabytes of data that's out there, which you're analyzing to get a true read on how people are feeling about the American election, around reality TV show winners, around whatever industry it's in. Otherwise, you've got marketeers making decisions based on potentially some level of bias. So this is really exciting, isn't it? What do you see? We were talking off before we hit record around some of the stuff that you're seeing right now and curiosity around this ongoing global debate around DEI, diversity, equality, inclusion. And particularly, across the world, I think we're seeing increased voices around the continued inequality, and then right down to sort of micro level of the bullying that's happening in organizations. So, and I'm imagining that there's a lot of emotional context that you could probably grab by deep listening. And you were sharing that this is one of your passion pieces at the moment. Tell us a little bit more about that.
This is a very important topic close to my heart, because it touches everybody. And when I was looking at workplace bullying as a narrative a couple of years ago, it showed deep, intense, negative emotions, as you can imagine. When I looked at it again 12 months later, same scenario. Now, to me, when I looked at it, I was like, well, when I see this sort of profile, I would expect action in market, right? Because in a commercial sense, if there's a problem with a product or a brand, that product or brand will not exist in 2 years' time, I can guarantee, right? So I was really curious to understand, why have we just continued to suffer with this deep resentment towards this issue? It's like suffering in silence, really. We were missing a catalyst to be heard. And I feel that in the last month or 2 months here in Australia, that catalyst has been the voice of the young people, right? They have a different paradigm as to why they, show up compared to us. We lived in a different world, so our voices were muted, whereas they have a different world, like your daughter, etc., your son, etc., right? So it was their bravery to say, you know what, this is not on anymore, and that became the catalyst to just literally open Pandora's box. So when I looked at workplace bullying and these issues around misogyny, patriarchy, white supremacy, sexual harassment, these are all powerful narratives in their own right, but they're so interconnected. It all relates to disrespect. And all of the emotional profiles, I can tell you, are very similar, intensely negative. We are sick to death of it. But now there's an opening to be heard. And the nuances around each of them are very different, as you can imagine. But it gives us clues as to what people are, what is really irking them, and through that we can actually advise corporates and advise policymakers on really hitting the chord on tone, right? Demonstrating to the market that we have heard you. Because change is ready to happen. I wrote an article predicting that we truly are at the precipice of a revolution. Because the market's ready, the emotions are charged, and there's an opening.
So it's going to take a lot of bravery or realism, whichever way you look at it, for a leader to be open to go, I'm ready to hear this stuff, knowing that by hearing it, by listening deeply, by understanding what is going on emotionally with their potential clients, customers, employees, that they're actually going to be able to shape the best way forward, that they're going to be able to potentially really strategize a plan that will pave them into the future, really put in place the right policies and procedures that are actually driving change versus the tick box of stuff that we're currently seeing. And whether you are a brand that's people-based or a brand that's a product-based or whatever industry you're in, what you're saying is there's a huge opportunity for those leaders brave enough to have the conversation and to listen deeply, because the answers are there. They've just got to choose to listen.
Correct. The answer's always there. It's already in the data. The market already has the wisdom. You just need to find it and uncover it. And it's your choice whether to take the leadership step to move forward, because the first person or the first leaders to do that, they will be rewarded. They will be. I mean, it's just people want to be heard. People want to work for employers that represent them. Even when we looked at diversity and inclusion in a recent piece for another client, the definition of D&I is not about gender. Like, we all know that, but then sometimes people don't listen still, right? There are so many facets to the D&I conversation that will continually evolve. And I see corporates spending hard dollars and budget on D&I and actually having champions of D&I. I think what this will help supplement the effectiveness of those programs would be to engage in some deep listening in the industry they're in and also how it relates to your brand. So imagine, I was very tempted to run Minter Ellison as the brand, right? Because, as we know, the CEO of Minter's had to resign, And so you look at that, and my curious mind was ticking again, going, I wonder what the market sees and perceives that move to be. Was it detrimental to the Minter's brand? Because you can imagine inside the organisation how many females are like scratching their heads going, now what? What do you do? And, if you're a graduate coming out of law school, do you want to choose Minter Ellison? Male or female? Do you want to be? So I didn't look at it because, If I continued to look at everything, I wouldn't get any work done. But that was something that was coming up in my head. It's like there is definite opportunity for brands to go, how does the market think of me right now? What's the truth? And just be brave enough to just face the music. Stare at yourself in the mirror. You can't progress forward without knowing where you are today.
So what I love about our conversation, Elisa, is you've finally been able to unleash your own brilliance. As you said, the genius that made you that person that was a little bit different, that wouldn't quite fit in, that would get the job and do a great job, and then suddenly it was like not anymore. Who experienced, your own challenges, as you said, racially, bullying, whatever it may be. Essentially, it's non-conforming. That this wonderful talent and genius is finally able to shine. Like, you've unleashed your brilliance. But what I love about your work is that everything you do is about unleashing the brilliance in others. It's about unleashing the brilliance in the teams, in the organizations, in the leadership, in the strategy. It's actually what you're doing is essentially you're giving a voice to the people that are talking already, and they're talking behind their computer screens and amongst themselves. And what you're saying is, let me hear you and I'll pass your message on. And I absolutely love everything that you're doing. So for any of our people that are listening in that want to find out a little bit more, that are open to having a conversation, what is the best way that they can find you?
I'm all over social media, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn, or we have a YouTube channel with lots of content, and also through Instagram, which is our fun playpen to, have fun with data. Or you can email me or go through our website and contact me directly. I'm always open. My role in this world is to, as you say, translate the truths of the market. We are in a position now where we have the beauty of technology to mine this very fast in an unbiased way, and represent and democratize data that's already out there. That's, to me, that will make my heart sing if I can work on more and more of those projects, because I see, as an economist, I don't like waste. It's all about allocation of scarce resources. And so we all have scarce resources in time, energy, and money. And so I want all businesses to survive and thrive. Businesses employ people. They're the engines of our economies, of our families. Happy workplaces, is happy the world. So to me, anything that I can do to help leaders make clear decisions with confidence, with data, I am your gal.
I love it. I think I don't think there's anything more I can add to that. I was going to say, so what are you passionate about? And I'm like, nope, she's done it there and then. It's like passionate about truth and choice and decisions and making decisions based on the facts. I'm so glad that you became that flamingo in that flock of pigeons, as I like to encourage people to do. I'm so glad that you have unleashed your brilliance. And I'm really excited to continue to watch your journey, to support your journey, because the world is ready to listen right now. And I think those people that choose to listen will be the ones that will absolutely give themselves a competitive edge into the future. And people are crying out to be heard. So thank you for your work. Thank you for sharing your journey, your story, your passion. And I know this conversation is going to continue. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Janine, and thank you to all the listeners.